Welcome to Landlord Diaries, where we talk about midterm rentals and the opportunities behind them. We'll share landlord stories, talk about maximizing investment potential, and discuss how to live the very best landlord life. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Furnished Finder, the place for everything midterm rentals. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy our content.
It's your Furnished Finder host team of the Landlord Diaries podcast. We appreciate you guys being here. If you love our show, please leave us 5-star reviews. Kelly Bailey, MTR enthusiast in the Austin, Texas area.
And hey everyone, I am Katie and I'm here with Kelly. Today we get to talk to Brendan, who is with a company called Fund That Flip. And they have a very unique offering for investors and people who are in real estate with loans to help you grow your portfolio if you maybe don't have just buckets of cash laying around, which at some point, every investor will hit that limit. So they have some really great products and they also have just like a really strategic approach. We also get to talk to Brendan about his personal real estate portfolio, including one of his properties that he just recently took from being an Airbnb to being a midterm rental. And we get to talk about how that transition was for him, what made him decide to do it, and so on. So definitely there's some good nuggets to take from today's show. We would like to remind everyone that this episode and every episode is brought to you by Furnished Finder. We are the one-stop shop for everything midterm rentals. You can list your property on there for $99 a year, and that gets you unlimited leads, unlimited connections, messages, however you feel like it can serve your business. And there's never any booking fees. So whatever price you list, that's the rent you're gonna get. We do not take a cut. So please enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe and like and comment and all the things that the kids are saying to do. It really does genuinely help us out. We put a lot of effort into these shows and so do our guests. So we love and appreciate all your feedback.
Today with us is Brendan Bennett, VP of Revenue for Fund That Flip. His personal portfolio includes 19 units in total, 17 long-term rentals, and 2 midterm rentals. I am excited for today's episode as I believe we all get stuck in the mindset of traditional lending, which limits our buy power. Brendan will give us some tangible ways that we can grow our portfolio even if we don't have the funds for it. If you are an MTR host that is open to value add renovations, then this is the episode for you. Brendan, thanks for being here today. How are you?
Thanks for having me, guys. Quite the intro. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. Well, we're going to split this episode in 2 halves. Because of the value add, we're going to talk about Fund That Flip first, and then we're going to talk about Brendan's personal portfolio. So let's go. Brendan, you're on an elevator. You have 30 seconds. What do you want to tell us about Fund That Flip to help us understand in layman's terms?
Ooh, put me on the spot. 30 seconds. So Fund That Flip is by investors for investors. So we were founded by a short-term rental investor who was having issues getting funding for his deals through conventional banks, private lenders. He set out on a mission to make access to capital more scalable, reliable, and easy for people that are investing, that are doing something a little bit more creative than maybe your traditional turnkey rental or something else in that sort that might be a little bit more difficult through a conventional lender.
Myself, I come from an agricultural business background in college. And what I loved is the supply chain management side of it. And on our intro call, I really liked how you said you're the end-to-end platform for real estate investors. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so the vision started with the lending side, right? So we started our business back in 2014, 2015. The main goal being the big issue that most investors that are looking to scale have is access to capital. So our initial goal was to find a really good business model and really grab some market share in that space. But the greater vision and mission of Fund That Flip is to offer value all the way up and down the entire cycle of a deal. So from finding a deal, making an offer on a deal, project management, construction management, all of these other things that you guys might find yourselves doing on a day-to-day basis with your real estate business. We eventually want to offer some level of a resource to investors and people in real estate to be able to operate their business from A to Z. So we are still early in that journey, but about a year ago, we purchased a software company that's very focused on the project management and deal analysis side of things. It's called FlipperForce. So that was one of our first additional steps in the direction of becoming that true end-to-end platform where we're more than just a lender. We offer these other tangential things that people can leverage in their business.
That's going to be clutch for midterm rental hosts, because as a lot of us are trying to, scale and get more and more properties, it becomes challenging. And since a lot of you can get to the point where you're kind of piecemealing things. So to have an end-to-end solution that starts with the funding, I think is such a great and a creative solution. So kudos on that.
I think the really exciting thing about that for me is I personally use 3 to 5 different softwares to run my current business. So I have a accounting system that's separate from my tenant management, that's separate from my listing, property listing service. So I think as much as we can attempt or achieve to combine those together, it's one less login. It's one less interface you have to use.
Right.
Now our real goal is to allow people to do what they love and what they're passionate, what they're skilled at, which is operating real estate, not all the, crossing of T's and dotting of I's that might not be as much fun, but necessary to the business.
Right. Well, it's hard to be a successful real estate entrepreneur if you also don't have all of the skill sets, right? Because you need to have marketing and accounting and analysis, and sometimes you need a little elbow grease. So to have tools to help where someone might not be as strong in one area or another is going to be really valuable. So I see here that your title is the VP of Revenue for Fund the Flip. So tell us more about your role and kind of what impact you make on the business.
Yeah, and if you guys don't mind, I'll give a little bit of a preview of my first couple of years at the company, because it kind of shapes where I'm at now and what I do for the company today. So I started with the company about 3 years ago on the underwriting team. I was coming out of graduate school. I knew I wanted to work for a real estate-based company. Got really lucky that Fund That Flip was located right in my backyard in Cleveland. Started poking around, applied for a job on the underwriting side. Started that in late 2019. So a few months later, as everyone knows, COVID hit in March, and a lot of things got dislocated within the business, just like most companies around that time. So I transitioned out of the underwriting side and had a brief stint in our capital markets, investor relations side. So I went from the person determining value of the property, what the scope of renovation should look like, are they purchasing it for the correct amount, to how do we raise the money, who do we raise it from, and why would they give us that money in the first place? So it was a really unique kind of onboarding experience for me, and I'm super grateful that things kind of translated the way they did, because I got a really good overview of the end-to-end cycle of our business. And then shortly after that, got placed into a sales role where I was back on the front end, helping investors like yourselves leverage our capital to be able to scale their business to whatever level that they desired. And after about a year in a loan sales type role, I was then elevated to more of a leadership role on the sales side. And very recently, I started to encompass the servicing and account management side of the business as well. So anyone that interfaces with the customer is someone that I interact with, and the teams that I work with, to make sure that we have an aligned message from sales rep to closing specialist to the person talking to you about your construction draws. We want to have a unified voice, and I try to do my best to make sure that happens across those teams.
Love it. And for those that so far have enjoyed listening to what that Fund That Flip does, and their wheels have started spinning, they're like, ding, 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 I've got some ideas here. What parts of the country do y'all serve?
So we are primarily East Coast. We're in about 30 to 35 states right now, majority of the states being east of Texas. We're starting to creep further and further west, so we do a little bit in Colorado. Nothing yet on the West Coast side, but some of our biggest areas that we do our loans in is going to be Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina. We're pretty strong in the Midwest, and Texas becoming a pretty big area for us as well.
Yeehaw! That's what I was waiting to hear. There we go. So we've got audience of midterm rental hosts, including myself and Katie, and Dave and we partner together. That's my husband, and we are looking to add an addition to our home that would be a proper master, because our current master it's kind of small. Like the bedroom size is fine, but it's a smaller bathroom. So when someone comes to view the home, if we ever want to sell it down the road, that would be one of the kickers that might make it slimmer by less people would be interested.
Sure.
So it helped us on the buy side, because we were able to get the property for $205 when the market value for it, I think, was $225, something like that. We also have a sunroom, which I'm in. This is my sunroom. I wish y'all could see the view one day. Maybe I'll give you a picture of what I look at. But in general, the square footage is around 1,200 square feet. And so we're thinking of adding a proper master with a nice, full shower, tub combo, etc. So should I use my funds that I have, or should I go through you guys to preserve my cash?
Great question. So I think the answer to that depends on what your goals are, right? So if you have $100,000 sitting in the bank and you're saying this renovation, this addition is going to cost me $80,000, but this is the only project I want to do this year. I don't have any other acquisitions I want to do. I don't want to do any additional expansion of my current business. I just want to add this addition and stabilize. We might not be the best fit for you, right? Because you have that cash and you're ready to roll with the addition. If you said, hey, Brendan, my goal is I want to complete this addition, maximize the sale or maximize the rent that I can get, but I also want to buy 3 or 4 more short-term, midterm rentals this year, I would definitely say that leveraging Fund That Flip or a company like ours, just to be able to really expand that amount of capital you have and parlay it into a few more acquisitions, that's where it makes more sense. Because how we would help is we would be able to fund the majority of that addition for you guys, the 70 to 80,000, wherever you guys land. So now you're sitting with that 70, 80 in your bank account. So if you're driving down the street and you're like, wow, there's another MTR that popped up right next to one of the existing ones we have, I'd love to make an offer on it. I only have to put 20% down. You now have that cash on hand to be able to make that acquisition, right? So one of the easiest ways to explain it is we help minimize the reduction of opportunity cost. So you don't have to say no as much when a good opportunity comes along, because we're helping fund the current opportunity in front of you.
Got it. And I forgot a very important part. It would not be just a master bed and bath. We're looking at making it into an ADU of some sort. I was thinking one of those cool library doors where it like when you go to those English bars and you're like, oh, that's the bathroom? Wow, how do you get in there? So like some sort of divider to make it a room that we can both shut off and rent out nightly or monthly. And then when we need it, open that up and use it for family, or, we're getting into fostering. So depending on if we have one kid or multiple kids in the home, then we can just go ahead and use it. So that's the big picture idea. Katie, what were you going to say?
Well, first off, I think to put a bow on what you're saying, Kelly, I think you and your husband do have like an investor mindset, and you show that because you have a portfolio and you're always looking to grow. So I think, it hypothetically would be a fit because you are always looking to, as Dave says, make your money work for you. Right. My question for Brendan as a follow-up is, as a non-traditional lender, what exactly do you guys lend for? Like, let's say, like you mentioned, sure, maybe there's an MTR that I discover, but I don't have the 20% down. Mm-hmm. Is like, what products exactly do you guys offer? Because I know that can make a really big difference to an investor and be the difference between whether they can acquire the property or not.
Great question. So our current product line primarily is geared towards those that are looking to buy a dilapidated single family or 1 to 4 family. Really, we kind of run the gamut up and down the residential sector. One that needs a little bit of value add. So on a deal like that, we could fund anywhere from 85 to 90% of the purchase and then up to 100% of the renovation. And that's for a short-term, call it transitional loan, right? So you're gonna take our loan, you're gonna purchase the property with fairly low money down. We're gonna fund the majority of the renovation, if not 100% of the renovation, and then you'd be looking to back that out into some level of a refinance, pay it off cash if that's what you're looking to do, pay off our loan, and now you're kind of on to the next phase. So we are looking to launch a rental product so investors can actually do both of those under one roof with us. Our game plans to have that out later in 2023, which is a big advantage because then you're handling all of the financing from dilapidated acquisition to cash flowing MTR or STR, whatever it might be. Right now, even though we don't offer that product, there are a ton of hard money lenders out there that offer a really awesome product, and it's called the DSCR product. So debt service coverage ratio. It's basically just how much money does the property earn versus what is your debt service per month. A lot less to do with your personal income, your tax returns, things of that nature.
That's the product that my husband and I use, and some family members, to close on our latest midterm rental, and it is a dream. There's
awesome.
So little paperwork and so little everything. It's amazing. But yeah, I think that's really good information for investors to know, because even there are a lot of MTRs out there that are even a slight level of distressed condition that maybe they can purchase for low, ramp up a little bit, get that after repair value really, really high, and then you can refinance it out, kind of following like the Burr method, if you will,
Exactly.
right? And that you can make that work. So I think that's great because it does open a lot more opportunities for investors to get creative, right? And to figure out like, okay, how can I make this work? Because even with small renovations, right, Kelly, we've talked to so many guests who added a bedroom or added an ADU before they made it a midterm rental. But for a lot of people out there, they're like, look, I don't have 60 grand sitting in my bank account that I can go add a bedroom and a full bath to. So, being that kind of in between lender, if you will, right? Even if you guys don't hold the loan for 30 years, like getting an investor over the hump where they can go and they can refinance it and turn it into a longer term product. That's something that I think is pretty great.
One thing that we've seen a lot recently is a lot of our new construction builders who were selling anywhere from 90 to 100% of their products leading up to the last like 5 or 6 months. Market kind of cooled off a little bit as interest rates peaked. So a lot of them transitioned. They're like, we have all this inventory. We don't want to sell it. We want to wait till home prices come back to a better spot. They're like, we're actually going to leverage your guys' loan to make this an STR or an MTR. So I don't know what subset of your guys' listeners are on the build to rent side of things, but that's what a lot of our investors leverage us for as well. So we'll help them do the new construction. They'll rent it out, whether short-term, mid-term, long-term, and they're backing it out into a rental product as well. So any sort of value add is where we can help.
Love it. Well, rumor always has it that there's some shady hard money lenders out there. And I want to make sure if I move forward with you guys and I'm late on a payment, or, how does that work with you guys to know that you're trustworthy and one of the good hard money lenders?
Yeah, my marketing team would probably be mad at me if I called us a hard money lender. So they know there's hard money has somewhat of a bad stigma with it, right? So just what you said, Kelly, a lot of people think 20% rates. If I miss a payment, someone's going to come take the house back right away. So I think we try to position ourselves more as a large scale private money lender. So we want to give you the same experience that if you went to your aunt, uncle, and mom and dad and said, hey, can you guys chip in, lend me $100K? We want it to be that same level of relationship experience. We really try to build a team around each of the borrowers we work with to try to deliver on that proposition. We're still running a business, right? So there's a balancing act between the two. So we definitely want to make sure we get paid on time and consistently and all of those things. But we also understand that borrowers that are scaling and doing a lot of business, there's some level of understanding and flexibility that has to happen as they scale, right? So again, I would never advocate that someone that we do business with misses a payment or goes past maturity on a loan. But when those things happen, we make a really good business case decision on how we're going to help that person out of it. What you hear a lot in the hard money space is this loan to own type shop. That is not what we are. We don't want to own real estate. We don't want to take over the property from you as a developer. We want to keep the ball in your court as much as possible because we know that's the best chance of everybody being successful. You guys making money, us getting paid back, and that's really what we're after at the end of the day. So it is actually in our best interest to get all the information, make a really good business case decision whenever something a little bit hairy comes up to make sure that everyone is on the winning side of it on the other side.
Good. And what is the borrow rate or the fee structure? And we won't, since we're going to make this a timeless episode, we're not going to hold you to anything you say for 2 years or 5 years from now. Even 2 months from now.
Sure. That's helpful. I think at a really high level from a leverage perspective, and this is somewhat timeless, we will fund anywhere from 80 to 90% of your total cost of acquisition plus renovation, right? So if you have a $200K total cost basis, we're going to fund anywhere from 160 to 180 grand, give or take. From a fee structure perspective, the main fees that we have are going to be your interest rate charged monthly, and then also an origination fee, which is pretty standard for the majority of lenders. We do have some closing costs associated, but it's mainly for us to be able to pay for an appraisal, draft the legal docs, things of that nature. So interest rates in this private money, hard money space are typically much higher than what you'll get at a conventional lender, right? So conventional lenders are at 6%, somewhere in that range. Private money, hard money lenders are going to be anywhere in like the 9 to 12% range, right? And really what you're paying for with that additional cost is the flexibility, the scale, a lender that understands the investor mindset and really understands what you guys are trying to achieve. It sounds a little bit corny, but I think it actually goes a long way when you're working with a lender or just a funding partner that understands, okay, this is what Kelly does. This is how she gets out of her projects. It might not look perfect on a spreadsheet, but we understand the story and we understand how she's trying to operate her business. So super high level, 80 to 90% of the total cost basis. We want to make sure that from a end value perspective, we're typically 60 to 75%, somewhere in that range of whatever the final value will be, and rates in that 9 to 12% range. And from an origination fee perspective, pretty standard across the industry, anywhere from that 1.5 to 2.5 of the gross loan amount. So some wide ranges there, but should give everyone a pretty good idea of what's available.
Yeah, this has been great content.
I see listings on your website for specific properties and bridge loan offerings as well. Is that something that you offer that someone can come in and passively invest in?
Yeah, so this is, to me, the really cool side of our business and what I got to learn when I did that brief couple of months over on the investor relations side. So we source our money from big institutional REITs, from insurance companies, from the places where you would assume a bank to get their money from. But we also source money from individual accredited investors. So what you're seeing on our website right now is if we were to book a loan with one of you two, we could decide to place that on our platform. And if Fund That Flip provided the 100K at the closing table, we then open that up to our investor pool and say, hey, who wants to take a $5,000 portion of this loan that we've originated to one of you two? So it gives people, instead of them having to meet you at a local meetup, drive to the job site and write you guys a check and do all this additional servicing related stuff, we do all of that for them. All they do is they invest their money. Assuming the borrower's making their interest payment, we're paying out those interest payments on a monthly basis to the investors on the back end.
That's a clever way to offer real estate offerings without owning the real estate offerings, right?
Yeah, I think it helps us kind of cast that broad net, right? Like we want to know everyone in the real estate business from down cycle to up cycle, and I think this is a way for people who maybe never even owned real estate. They're not a landlord. They don't do fix and flip. They just happen to make a little bit of money or have a little bit of money. And they're like, real estate's cool to me. I can invest in Texas if I live in Texas. I can invest in the Midwest if I live there. So yeah, it's another way to try to get more people into the Fund That Flip sphere, but also help us provide money to investors like yourself.
Right.
I love it. Well, thanks for all the great content. www.fundthatflip.com for this portion of the podcast. And then I believe, Brendan, you also have your own podcast that you co-host called Real Estate Investing Unscripted. And heads up, guys, our very own Furnish Finder CEO, Brian Payne, will be on Brendan's show coming up in the next couple months. I don't know when we'll release this episode. So tell us about your show, Brendan.
Yeah, thanks for the intro there, Kelly. So we rebooted the show about 3 months ago. So beforehand, our CEO, Matt Rodak, had recorded all the episodes. I really would encourage anyone to tune in. Anything that Matt says, he's dropping some really good knowledge. So awesome show up to that point. Myself and my co-host David were lucky enough to get chosen to reboot the podcast, and we try to really bring in a different group of guests that just add a ton of value from different areas. So like you mentioned, we had your guys' CEO on. We had a CEO from a real estate data company on recently. We had an economist on. So we really tried to pull from a bunch of different strings because we know our listeners are going to range from those investors who want to hear about the money side, and then the borrowers who want to say, like, what are my terms going to be? So we try to please all of those different audience bases with having a wide variety of guests on the show on a biweekly basis.
Awesome. Love it. Well, let's go ahead and move on to your personal portfolio. So 19 properties, mainly long-term rentals right now with 2 midterm rentals. So how are your midterm rentals going?
The midterm rentals are awesome. So the origin story for how I learned about midterm rentals, it came, one of my best friends from high school and college is a travel nurse, and he was living in North Carolina, and he said, hey, I'm going to hit the road. I want to go find a travel nurse job in San Diego. And I was really intrigued by this because at that time I was a long-term landlord, but I wasn't really sure about this 30 to 90 day type leasing arrangement. And he's like, yeah, I use this website called Furnish Finder, and this is where all my travel nurse friends go to find different nursing accommodations. And I know a lot of business professionals use the website as well. So I started to click into a little bit more and try to understand. And this was all fairly recently in the last 6 months. And I had a long-term rental that I converted to an Airbnb that, as you guys can probably imagine, Cleveland in the cold winter months, the Airbnb was not doing as hot. So I was looking for
dries up a little bit, huh?
I was looking for a different alternative, and I'm like, what better way than to maybe transition into somewhere in the middle, which is the midterm rental. So I actually got extremely lucky on this first midterm rental that I started with. My real estate broker that is very much a mentor to me, I told her that I was really eager to get into the space. And by coincidence, she had a discussion with one of her clients who said, hey, my son is coming to Cleveland for an internship with NASA. He needs a furnished place to stay for 3 months. Do you have anything available? So we right away made the switch to kind of transition it, which wasn't that difficult because we already had it furnished from the Airbnb. And it's been a pretty awesome experience so far. I'm only 2 months in, so I'm still a newbie in the MTR space by every definition. But I love, relative to short-term rental, the maintenance as far as the tenant interactions and the vacancy, the turnover, it's way more low-key. So I'm really liking how it's kind of right in between on an Airbnb versus the long-term that I'm used to.
So Brendan, tell us about your portfolio. I know you said you have, was it 1 or 2 midterm rentals right now, but tell us kind of what the rest of your portfolio looks like, and how you scaled your own portfolio to the size that it is now.
Sure. So I started purchasing rental properties back in 2018. So I was 22 coming out of graduate school. I didn't have any money. I had probably $2,000 to my name at that point saved up, but I was super passionate about real estate. I'd read all the Bigger Pockets books, listened to a ton of their podcasts, and I was at a Thanksgiving dinner with a family friend group, and I was just running my mouth on how much I love real estate and how much I wanted to get into it. And I caught the attention of my best friend's uncle, who is someone who has never invested in real estate, but had always had the initiative and the dream to do it. He's like, hey, Brendan, like, I'm really intrigued by this. If you'll be the sweat equity and the person that kind of pulls things together, he's like, I'll be your financing partner. So Uncle Bob was essentially my first couple private lender relationship where he and I acquired 4 properties together where I would try to find a really good deal, whether it was on market or off market. I would then run the construction and do a little bit of subcontracting work myself, and then would back it into a long-term rental and do a cash out refi to pay off that initial loan to Uncle Bob. So my first 4 properties were managed through that. And shout out to Uncle Bob, because would not have been where I'm at today had he not taken a risk on me. So that's hopefully inspiring for some of the other people that are listening that are younger. Like, just keep talking about it. Someone's bound to say yes at some point. And then outside of those initial 4, I did a lot of house hacking from the age of 22 to now as well. So pretty much every year on the year, I would buy a new duplex. I would move in, do the renovations needed, rent out, and then I would move on to the next. So one of my midterm rentals that I have now is a house hack that I just moved out of about a month ago, where the first tenant in after I moved out is a couple that are travel nurses in the Cleveland area currently. So I've switched up strategy from long-term, short-term to midterm, depending on the property, depending on the area. But the core of my business is very much still the long-term rental space. But now that I've learned all the benefits of the MTR and STR space, I'm starting to dip my toe in there a little bit more with my existing portfolio.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great combo, right? It's like if you have properties in the heart of a short-term rental area that can make 3 times during certain seasons, and you don't have an HOA or restrictions there, then it's like, why not do short term during those seasons and midterm during the rest of the seasons? And then many of us midtermers decide, you know what, it's not worth the little bit extra for us. We really like the ease of just being able to host and manage 2 to 4 tenants a year. Like, if it's typically 90 days. So we are seeing more digital nomads. So you might get some month requests here or there that don't shy away from them, guys. Digital nomads are great guests. So it's like, if you can get 2 to 4 guests a year and make 1.5 to 2 times the profit versus long-term, it's kind of hard to say no to.
So awesome. It's great. The one Airbnb that I had that I converted to an MTR. So the long-term rent on it was around $1,300 or $1,400. In the good cash flowing months of Airbnb in the summer, it was closer to $3,000, somewhere in that range. In the winter, it dropped all the way down to below what I would have been getting for a long-term. But when I switched to midterm, it was pulling in $2,200. So it kind of landed me right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
It was a good stopgap between that slow season. And when this person moves out in May, I'm going to re-kickstart the Airbnb just to try to earn at that higher level for a couple months and then transition back to MTR when the time comes.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because you don't have to just pick one strategy or another, right? You can use midterms to supplement weather and seasonality, like winter in Cleveland.
Big time.
You can also use it to offset, like, let's say you're going to go on a month-long vacation overseas and it's not practical for you to be running an Airbnb, but you feel comfortable leaving a midterm rental guest, in the hands of a trusted pseudo property manager or whatnot. Or let's just say you have a really big project on your plate with a flip coming up, right? And you need to back off some of the workload from the rest, turn it to a midterm rental for 6 months. There's something to that, in knowing that you have that flexibility, at least depending on, your area and regulations and whatnot. But it really isn't that hard to go to midterm rental from short-term rental. In fact, most of the properties that go short-term to midterm would be over-furnished in a good way. Exactly. Right? Because we tell people all the time, if you're doing a midterm rental, you don't have to have the board games and the books and 1,000 beach towels, but no one's going to be upset if it's there. Like, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy shift.
So that's actually a great point, Katie, because a recent guest expressed it's harder for short-term hosts to go to midterm, which it's probably a mindset, because they're used to those instant bookings where it's like, ding, okay, I've got the insurance already built into my booking platform. All I've got to do is, use the systems in place on Airbnb or on VRBO. they rebranded Verbo. And
I still call it VRBO.
I know I have to get away from my mindset there. And so, Brendan, from your experience, what was that like for you having, some short-term, which one did you do first? Did you try short-term first and then midterm?
Yep, short-term to midterm first.
So was it easy setting up the contracts and transitioning to midterm?
That was really easy for me, mainly because we already had the long-term leases set up in HelloSign. We had them pre-drafted. So I had to do some minor manipulation to some of the language in there just around timing. But other than that, it was pretty turnkey. So I had the place cleaned, which it was getting cleaned anyway because the final Airbnb guest was moving out. And the midterm guest moved in a day or two after, signed the agreement, and it was pretty straightforward. I would totally agree that when we furnished the midterm rental, which was vacant after I had moved out from that unit, it was a little bit easier just from a furnishing side because we weren't worried about all the little knickknacks and all the things that you mentioned. Just the big things that I think were really important. And, those two guests are having a great time so far and have had great feedback, which has been awesome.
Good. Excellent.
Yeah, that's a good note, Kelly, is probably adapting to the process where you're going to have to talk to a tenant, answer questions. They might want to FaceTime and see the property.
Yep.
They're going to care a lot more about things like parking and Wi-Fi and, blackout curtains. And you're going to have to get used to doing a tenant screening and having an actual lease. So that's probably more of the adjustment, although I just want to encourage everyone that it's not that complicated.
Nope.
And Furnish Finder has the tools built in, like in your dashboard, you have your messages, you have your tenant leads of all types, and you also have KeyCheck, which is the sister company, which you are not required to use by any means, but we have made it and put it there so that if you as a landlord want the screening and the leases and everything right at your hands, it's right there. So yes, you
And
have
rent
choices
payments.
and Furnish Finder will never stop you from using whatever systems that you'd like, but KeyCheck is there, and everything's in one place if you think that is best, because we've just tried to make it very simple for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Brendan, we had a question from a YouTube comment that I'm trying to circle back into future episodes. So shout out. The question is, how does mail work for your midterm rentals? So mail and electricity. So if you have anything in running MTRs, the mail side is if you have room rentals, then that's going to change it up a bit where you just have multiple names on the mailbox. But then the other side of it is junk mail as well. So what do you have any tips for mail or electricity?
Yeah, great question. So on the utility side, electricity, all utilities included, I try to incorporate all of that into my list price for the midterm rental. So while I could have had it switched over to those that were moving in for 3 months, and these guests actually gave me a high degree of confidence that they were going to renew for an additional 3 months, so more of like a 6-month lease, it was still easier for me just from a headache and efficiency and management standpoint, say, I'm going to leave that in my name. I'm going to make some assumptions around cost. And I think that's where you have to be really careful, because if you assume too low, then it's cutting into your profit margin of what you're hoping to earn. Luckily, I'd lived there for a year and a half, so I was pretty comfortable with what those bills should be for a family of 2 or 3. So I take care of all the utilities in my name. I don't look to switch them from guest to guest, and I just have that included in their price that is listed in their lease as well. From the mail side, I did set the expectation, which I think is important, but also very simple with the resident, that, hey, if you get any mail that has my name or another previous tenant's name, let me know. I'm lucky enough that I live 10 minutes away from the property. I can swing by and pick it up. You'd probably have to deploy a slightly different strategy if you're a long distance MTR landlord. I'm very fortunate where most of them are pretty close to where I live. And having the tenant just switch their mailing address for a mail forwarding for a short period of time for the 3 or 6 month stint. So they're from Georgia. They turn on mail forwarding to this address for a short period of time, and they can shut it off as soon as they plan to move back to Georgia.
Kelly, I actually would be curious to compare here to see how the 3 of us all do this, because I have a feeling we all do it a little differently.
What's your style, Katie?
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay, so I, for our midterm rentals, put all the utilities in our name. However, I put a cap on it. And that is because one of ours is a studio, the other is a 2-bed condo, so they're smaller. So I know that if I get a crazy high utility bill, it's because we're keeping the thermostat at 77 and not 69, right? So, and I'm very upfront with them. I will say that one of the rentals, the water bill was just way higher than I ever expected. And these are long distance rentals. So I checked in with someone local and I was like, does this feel insane? And they were like, yeah, they just built a new water treatment facility. Everyone's water bills are crazy. So then I increased that allowance and I just increased my base price of rent because I'm like, that's not their fault. But yeah, so I and as far as mail goes, I don't bring it up unless they ask about it. I had one tenant who never said anything. And I had another tenant who asked, she said, hey, I have some people who are going to be sending me some stuff here. Can I get the mail key? And then I'm like, sure, I'll give you the mail key. No problem. Otherwise, I have my boots on the ground person check the mail every 3 to 4 weeks because they can order through Amazon. And if they order packages or something, they're just put, it's like a community mailbox. They're put by there. They're not in anything they can't access. So,
Yeah. So Dave and I, we, as I think a lot of you that listen to the show pretty regularly are aware, we love the adventure seekers. So those that are like us enjoy having doors open. So our places have kind of that natural transition of a lot of light. You can leave the doors open. So we do also have a cap in place, mainly as a disclaimer. We don't actually analyze it very often or use it, but we do put it in the lease just as that, backup safety net. And then I put notes by the doors reminding guests that, hey, if you want the doors open, we love that too. Just remember to turn the AC off or the heater off so that it's not running up the bill. And so that's the style that we have embraced, and we haven't had to take any extra from the cap. So, and it's a generous cap. But I will say, to be fair to your guests as well, in Texas, the prices range a lot, and I'm sure that's a lot of the country. But if as a landlord, you end up being on a, what is it, variable rate, well, that's not their fault. That's your fault for not locking it in at the right time, right? So it's like making sure that if you have a big jump because you went from a fixed rate and your contract ended and you moved over to a variable rate,
like the budget billing,
adjust.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Just adjust. Like you were saying with the water, analyze, be fair, be generous. But it's not bad to have those disclaimers in place if someone is abusing the system. And I don't think, it doesn't sound like any of us use the automatic, the more of the advanced thermostats where you can, cut them off at a, say, hey, you can't turn it below this or above this. But that's another option that a lot of landlords do embrace, just to make sure no one's taking advantage of the system.
The cap is a really, really good tip. You guys are, I'm glad I'm on here. I'm a newbie learning from some of the experts. So it's really smart because I have what I assume to be like a 2 to 250 budget built into my rent rate. But like you said, it varies month to month, and that could easily blow through, whether it's weather related or whether they just like to keep the thermostat at 74 degrees in the winter, right? It really just depends.
Yep.
Well, that's my thing, is even if it's a very, very, like, let's say it's crazy cold, right? Unfortunately, that's out of my control. So like it's everyone in the country or the area is going to pay a higher utility rate at that time. So like, but yeah, like Kelly said, if it's a little bit over, if it's something like I did with the water bill being higher than I anticipated, like I'm not going to penalize the tenant, but I do like to hold them accountable, because I do know that when I go stay in an Airbnb or a hotel, I'm like, oh, I'm cold. Let me crank it all the way up.
Oh, yeah.
Or like, I don't feel, this is awful, but like, I don't always feel as responsible. And I want these tenants to move in and treat it like their home.
So, Brendan, I notice I always like to look through guests' or hosts Furnish Finder listings and see what some hosts take advantage of and what others don't. And we have many guests that don't take advantage of the owner verification badge, but you did take advantage of that badge. So why did you choose to add the owner verification badge and to your Furnish Finder listings?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, I was getting into the MTR space as my first listing or first trial at doing a Furnish Finder listing. So I wanted to make sure that I had all my T's crossed and I's dotted and give myself the highest chance of success possible. And I think having that verification just puts you up a level, right? It's not going to rent the place for you, but it'll give you that a little bit extra credibility that maybe if someone's picking between you and someone else who maybe isn't verified could give you the slight edge. So I think that was my motivation for doing is that I wanted to make sure that although I am a newbie, I don't have to come off as a newbie to the prospective tenants that want to rent out my place.
Yeah, that's a great point. Same with reviews. It's crazy how many hosts out there don't go after the reviews on their property. So if you are able to be one of the hosts that does ensure 5-star reviews on all your properties, that gives you a leg up as well. So good advice. Well, I think that's all my questions. Katie, do you have any more questions for this episode?
I think my last question would just be any advice that you'd like to give fellow midterm rental hosts that I know you said you're a newbie, but that maybe you've already found beneficial, that you've already found to make an impact.
Yeah, I think the one strategy to me that got me very comfortable to taking some of the risk in the short-term and midterm rental space is using a duplex or some level of a small multifamily to kind of hedge your bets a little bit. So in Cleveland, we're very fortunate. There's a ton of 2 to 4 families available for reasonable prices relative to the area. So once I had a long-term rental tenant in one unit, I said, okay, my bases are covered. I have my utilities, my mortgage payment, everything else covered. I'm not making any money, but I also can't lose, right? Even if the other unit sits vacant for a little bit, I'm still not coming out of pocket every month to keep up with the maintenance of the property. With that additional just like psychological freedom, knowing that you're not coming out of pocket each month, it gives you a little bit more confidence to take a little bit of risk. So that is what allowed me in this Airbnb to take that risk and go into that space because it was a duplex and I already had my mortgage covered. When I had to make the transition from Airbnb to midterm, I wasn't sure how long that would take and if in February, if that'd be a very difficult time frame to get that done in. But I was okay if I sat vacant for 30 to 45 days to find the right tenant because, again, I was hedging my bet with my long-term tenant. So while I could go both up and down of this duplex as a midterm, as a short-term, and really maximize my profits, my current risk appetite tells me that I want to kind of sit somewhere in the middle where I'm not quite ready yet on a per building basis to go all in. I kind of want to take a little bit of a hedge strategy, but I can still have multiple MTRs. I'm just going to spread it out across my different duplexes that I own.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
I think that's great.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic episode. Thank you, Brendan, for being with us. Reminder, if you want to connect with Brendan, all of his links will be in the show notes on YouTube. But do you want to give a shout out for the audio listeners, Brendan, how they can get a hold of you?
Absolutely. You guys can find me on LinkedIn, Brendan Bennett. Also, feel free to reach out to us via fundthatflip.com. Hit any of the call to actions or buttons on the site, and you'll get in touch with someone on the website. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter, Brendan Q. Bennett. And we can drop my email as well if anyone has any direct questions.
Well, thanks for being here. And reminder, if you are loving our show, we would so appreciate those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for being here, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.